Hello gamers, we are back with another Pool 1 match, this time between Bohrier and leoperi99. Bohrier, longtime RBY player, I don't believe that they've ever played RBY NU, so this will be a new experience for them. Leoperi, we saw a match from before, so coming back around for his second match of this tournament. Let's hop right into it. Game 1. We see a Charizard lead against an Arcanine lead. This is Charizard favored, although you don't actually have to switch out as Arcanine. You could just go for Body Slams, try to paralyze the Charizard, take it out of the game. We have a Mrs. Mime sighting on turn 1 already, which is pretty funny. I would not switch Mr. Mime into Charizard on a predicted Earthquake because you're into it KO range from Slash or Fire Blast after that. It's already not a very favorable matchup for Mime, but at least when you start off on turn 1 already in against Zard, you can paralyze it and hit it with a couple Thunderbolts. This is probably not going to go quite as well. I think if you lead the Arcanine, you either commit to this or you go to a Water type. Poliwrath is a nice backup for Arcanine because once Poliwrath is in, it's pretty risky for faster sleepers to try to switch into it because it can click Hypnosis pretty freely in Zard. Mr. Mime comes in, takes a little bit of damage, and Bohrier goes to their own Mime. So they pretty much even this out, assuming that there's no paralysis. Leoperi making a very smart move and going back to Arcanine because this is a much more favorable matchup, and Zard is not going to want to switch into a possible Body Slam from it. Speaking of, I think you can just go for Body Slam there and not risk a Fire Blast miss. Blastoise comes in. As Arcanine clicks Agility, I think it's a little bit wasteful to click that this early, but we've got a Venusaur. And I believe Mime barely survives this Razor Leaf, so makes sense to get out to Arcanine. So far, lots of dancing around. I think they could both just hit a little bit more. Right here, I think Agility might be an okay click, honestly. And just Hyper Beam this Blastoise or something, guarantee you get sleep with Venusaur. Little bit risky to click Body Slam if you paralyze this Blastoise. I mean, you can threaten it with Venusaur anyway, but it's a little bit more predictive. Hyper Beam crit goes far. This is part of why water types are having a lot of difficulty in this tier, as the fire types are faster and can just do stuff like that to them. So we see what might be Bohrier's only water type go down already as Raticate comes in. Kabutops as the switch in. I get that it's a normal resist, but when it gets paralyzed like this, it's very hard for it to do anything, so now it's probably just going to stay in and click Slash. Honestly, Kabutops' Eradicate check is growing on me a little bit, but it's still not the safest thing. Works out for Bohrier here. I think depending on what Leoperi had in back, you might consider like pivoting through Kabutops and then going to the Venusaur on what is probably going to be a T-Bolt. And that might be a nice way to get sleep here. I mean, the Mr. Mime's at 22% and paralyzed, so probably that gets sacked instead. But I still think that baiting that is probably better than trying to go for it with Kabutops, especially when there's still 2 unrevealed Pokemon in the back. Could be Moltres, could be Fearow, could be Aerodactyl, so I think that's a little bit early to throw the Kabutops away, but at least it got some decent damage on Raticate. Still, there's a fully healthy Zard, and these team members that we've seen over here in the corner, not the best equipped to beat Charizard, so it's looking a little bit difficult here. Leoperi is clicking these agilities very early on, and there's Aerodactyl, so I'm sure that he's now wishing he had the Kabutops. I think so far it's been a little bit of a wasteful use of Venusaur to use it like this. I don't like that Fire Spin very much. I think you just hit the Aerodactyl. It's already burnt. But, I mean, this is something you can do, I guess. So I think we're just going to sit here watching Fire Spins for a bit I really hope that leoperi doesn't go for another one and just clicks Fire Blast when this ends, because it definitely OHKOs here. 5 hitter. Actually, that might even be double edge range at this rate. Probably a little bit out of range. And a miss, which is going to let Sky Attack come through. No crit though, so not a big deal. And now you can definitely just double edge it. Oh wait, but this has Fire Spin, so it probably doesn't have double edge. Probably has Hyper Beam. Now that makes Charizard a problem here. I think you can Fire Spin to pivot, but you need to get out. You can't sit here and try to 1v1 this Zard. So great move by leoperi, going back to Mrs. Mime over here. Unfortunately, Bohrier is going to make the right play in sacking Mr. Mime, which means that Raticate will just come in and threaten this again. Miss Mime survives this, so this is now looking a lot better for leoperi, although Charizard is still looking like a big threat. We'll see. Worst comes to worst, you can try to fish the sleep with Venusaur, but there's a Poliwrath. Okay. So I think I immediately have a retrospective criticism here where I'm thinking you could have gone to that Poliwrath on turn 1 instead of Mime and played a very different game. Venomoth, kind of a huge threat right now because you didn't click Hypnosis there either. I think when you see Bohrier's team and see those first 5, you should probably assume that the last is a sleeper and just click your sleep move. It works out for leoperi this time, but definitely not the best odds playing it this way. Now, if I'm Bohrier, I think that I go for the Swords Dance with Charizard here and hope for a sleep miss. Because I don't think you can just do this, because then Poliwrath's going to come in and just surf you. So I think as bad as the odds are, I think if you're a Swords Dance Zard, you have to just go for it. If this isn't a Swords Dance Zard, it was just screwed in the first place. We see Earthquake, Body Slam, Fire Blast, so there is some odds, and of course, because we see Fire Blast, it can't have Hyper Beam plus Swords Dance, so I don't think Bohrier really had an out at that point. Overall, well played by leoperi. I think retrospectively, the big thing I'd highlight is the Kabutops could have been saved and probably have done more. I also think that Bohrier waited way too long to engage that Venomoth. There were definitely some chances earlier in the game, although leoperi did a pretty good job of mostly only using things that were 90 speed and above or having a sleeper in. So he did make it difficult, but definitely you have to find more opportunities to use that Venomoth. You can't just bring it in at the end of the game like that and expect it to do much. Beyond that, if that was a Swords Dance Charizard, I think Bohrier could have tried to use it earlier to set up and look for a chance to wall break a little bit with it. Looking at the teams, I think what I'm thinking about is Blastoise seems to be looking worse and worse in this meta. I think you could very easily replace it with a Poliwrath on most teams and probably improve. Leoperi's team I really like, although I am souring a bit on doing double fire without Charizard. I think Charizard's speed tier is really nice. It also helps make sure that you don't get walled out by Kabutops. So I might have replaced the Fire Chicken over there with a Charizard. But otherwise, I really like that team actually. With that, let's check out game 2. Leoperi up 1-0. Charizard lead again, into an Arcanine again. I think, there we go. So this time the Poliwrath comes out. I know I'm watching this retrospectively, but it's almost like leoperi could hear me. And now here I just click Hypnosis. And there we go, off to a great start already. Fearow coming in. I don't know if I would ever go hard Fearow into something like a Poliwrath. And forced out immediately as Bohrier has to go to Seadra. I think Bohrier is playing a little too fast and loose with these pieces. Like, Seadra's not going to do anything this early. I don't think you can switch it into Moltres like that. Like, you might break this Poliwrath, but look how much damage you've taken in the process of switching in and then doing that. Now this Siege is a complete non-factor for the rest of the game. That speed tier isn't going to let it beat any fires, it's not going to let it beat another Mrs. Mime. I'm guessing leoperi brought the same team this game, while Bohrier seems to have brought this more speed-heavy team, double normal, agility Seadra, Charizard, and just kind of going for it and throwing these Pokemon at leoperi. This Paralyzed Rat is going to be fodder for fire types in a second if it doesn't get Psychic dropped right now. Doesn't get dropped, so it should still win this. Oof, bad luck. Yeah, so I think Bohrier is playing a little too fast and loose. Like, you see the Arcanine, you see the Poliwrath. You can have a pretty good pretty good guess this is going to be the same team. But kind of just throwing away Seadra instead of going to Poliwrath and getting sleep. And then over here, I mean, clicking Seismic Toss on that Mime, sure. leoperi revealing a Venomoth this time instead of a Venusaur, so not quite the same team, looks a little bit changed, so I understand getting caught by surprise by that. But I don't get why you revenge with the Poliwrath there. I think you could just go to Fearow and force some progress, seeing the speed tiers in this team. So, not the biggest fan of that. leoperi wisely taking the opportunity to get a sleeper in again. It's not going to get a sleep because its Charizard's asleep, but it's still a Poliwrath, which is a fighting type, and there's a Venomoth, which can click Psychic on it. Stun Spore is also really threatening to those 100 speed mons, so if there's a Predict on that here, and there is, but it misses. Now, I wonder, do you sack this or just go to Arcanine? Or going to Arcanine makes sense. Fearow's very incentivized to Drill Peck there. And Arcanine's pretty disposable at this point. Interesting body slam. I think you can just Fire Blast and trust that if Zard switches in, you're still doing all right. And Charizard comes in. This is rough for Bohrier now, especially if that lead Zard is an SD, because now this Zard can just boost on this Fearow all at once and win the game. But it is not a Swords Dance Zard, so this one's just gonna slug the opposing team, land some hits. Poliwrath is a little bit scary at this point, actually, especially when it hits that Hypnosis. So I think you're really reliant on Venomoth to stun this or do some big damage to it. I think you just go for Psychic now that you took that Surf. Try to set up for Moltres to win the game. You definitely don't Mega Drain. You need damage a lot more than you need whatever healing that's going to give you. And now this is looking really hard. Moltres has to do a lot by itself. My guess is Bohrier is going to win this. I don't think that these agilities really matter unless one of them's about to try to go for some Fire Spin Gaming, and oh my lord. Sorry, but the disdain is in my voice because I hate doing this on the best of days, and this is such an unnecessary Fire Spin. Bohrier's already up. If you just trade hits back and forth with this Moltres, your Poliwrath is going to win. leoperi did not bring a Fire Spin Moltres anyway. And Bohrier really should just be throwing Fire Blast at this. But insistent on going for Speed Tie Fire Spin, a 35% proposition. Really just not the best angle to win this, and if you keep getting double-edged, you could lose this game. Moltres could just crit through that Poliwrath and win. So I really, really don't like this. I think you just have to go for Fire Blast if you don't have double edge. I think we're going to speed this up because this is a little bit silly. I think you can just double edge here as leoperi. I don't know why you need to go for Fire Blast there. We're going to keep upping the speed until this Fire Spin Gaming ends because the outcome here is pretty much just determined. Moltres got close. If it had a little more HP, it could have won that, honestly. But wow, Charizard Wake. So now it's down to when Bohrier's wakes. That's going to be really funny if that ends this game. Last chance. Wow, okay. leoperi ends up winning it on an early wake. And Leoperi's now up 2-0 off of that. What a weird endgame. So looking back at these teams, Leoperi brought triple fire again. Zard Moth this time instead of that previous team. I really like fire spam. I think I mentioned that last time Leoperi played because he brought a fire spam team one of those games as well. I think having two sleepers like this is also really nice. Gives you some flexibility because you have one that switches into Zard and one that switches into Waters. Yeah, I'm a big fan of this team. I think that the weakest link is probably the Arcanine, and it's still a pretty solid link. I might say drop one of the Arcanine or Moltres for something like Kabutops just to give you a little more security, or Raticate just to give you a little bit more revenge killing power. But overall, I'm a fan of it. And I think you can often just not reveal the other fire types and then use Venomoth or Poliwrath to get sleep on Kabutops, and then you're pretty open to break through their team. Bohrier going for this really aggressive build. Only sleeper is Poliwrath. You've got a bunch of agility clickers and a bunch of fast Pokemon. Zard, Fearow, Rat. So just really all-out aggression. A couple Pokemon on that team get kind of stuffed by Kabutops, but that's kind of what you have Raticate, Poliwrath, Seadra for. I do think if you have a Seadra, then beating a triple fire team should not be super hard, but it was used early in places where maybe Poliwrath could have been used instead. So I think my feedback would be if you're going to bring a Seadra, try not to reveal it that early. Save it a little bit longer and maybe it'll do some more work for you. I also think Fearow can just stay in and take some of these fights, even if it goes down. Getting some big chip on something like Moltres and then enabling Zard to come in can be good too. So just a thought for future games. Game number 3. Zard lead for the third time into a Venomoth lead, so a bit more of an advantaged matchup, but Aerodactyl back. Body Slam click, nice prediction, gets a Paralyze on Aerodactyl, and if this happens to be a Swords Dance Zard, it's very happy. In comes a Blastoise on a Toxic click. I don't really know about clicking Toxic there, especially when you have a Venomoth in back. I think you just double back to Venomoth. So now we're going to have a little Blastoise war, kind of forced because of the Toxic. And Leoperi really doesn't need to click anything that can get countered here, but does. I think you could have just clicked Surf because Toxic is quickly ramping up. And Toxic doesn't tick when you get a KO, so that gives Bohrier the advantage here, but Leoperi wisely revenging with something that's faster than any sleeper to make it a little harder for sleep to happen. Bohrier is going to go for it anyway, but there's a paralyzed Aerodactyl in back. And Bohrier makes a nice call and predicts it. I don't know if I'd like staying in. Aerodactyl has Fire Blast and a pretty good crit rate, but it works out this time. The special drop is nice too in case one connects, and no crit. So this Venomoth is now much better positioned. Now, I don't think you go for this 50-50. I think that there's other times you can do this later. And I think I would have gone to Zard instead of Aerodactyl, especially if it's just a 4-attack Zard. Because this arrow is going to do nothing now. And it's going to let up agility for Moltres. So now I think even if this was a Fire Spin Moltres, you just go to Zard, start clicking buttons. If you have setup moves, this is a perfect time to click Swords Dance. No Swords Dance, just going to try to disable the Moltres, but doesn't work out. And it's not a Fire Spin Moltres anyway. I think if you have Swords Dance, you absolutely have to click it here. So Bohrier's 3 lead non-Swords Dance Charizards in a row. And I think Leoperi is content to just throw attacks out left and right here at this point. But unfortunate crit. Now, depending on what's in back, that may not have been advisable, and there's a good chance that one Pokemon in the back is Mr. Mime, because most people have been bringing Mr. Mime. But goes for the Venomoth and just gets crit as well. Now, if the last is a Mime, I think that's a little bit unforgivable. I think you just had to go to Mime and take the trades. Yeah, I think that that was too risky with the rat and the Venomoth. I think you can just go to Mime, trade damage, and then let rat revenge later. Though, to be fair, there is a Charizard in back, and it makes sense to think about saving Mime to paralyze it to make sure it doesn't get out of hand. Yeah, I don't know. I do think that Mr. Mime getting two Oko crits like that also just makes the game pretty impossible to play. So I'm not sure there's much Leoperi could have done better. I think maybe Order of Mons usage might have been worth considering. Maybe not going straight to Aerodactyl, for example, on that turn one, but going to Blastoise and then doubling out. And the more of these games I watch, the more I am really souring on Blastoise, because if you have a Poliwrath and they have a fire lead and your lead is weak to fire, you go to Poliwrath and then you've stuffed any potential entry by Venomoth or what have you because it's too afraid of taking sleep on entry. I do think people leading fires need to be more open to doubling to Venomoth if they see a good matchup, because otherwise you are letting in that Poliwrath, but Blastoise is just too passive for this new metagame. I think it's remaining here because of the inertia from the old metagame where it was widely considered top 5, but even then it was really known to be moth fodder. And so we're seeing that pan out even more in this meta as it's gotten more fast and aggressive. So Bohrier gets on the board, 1-2 for him now as we go into game number 4. Magneton lead, I think I've said before, I'm not a really big fan of this, and Leoperi getting out, which makes me wonder, what are you looking for in that lead matchup if you switch out of Mime? Because I would think the reason you do that is so you can paralyze the Mime. There's no such thing as water leads, really. Like, maybe people might lead Poliwrath, but even then, you're not really getting that much out of leading Magneton. Bohrier goes to Magneton as well, which I think is kind of a cool move here, given the special dropped Mime, but I think if you do that, I'm gambling on the Thunder to Oko the Mime and not let it paralyze me. But this is also pretty safe. I vehemently disagree with going Aerodactyl on Magneton. Like, even if you get the subfish, so what? You're hitting it for like 22% with double edge. So you're losing a lot of health. I think Magneton could have also considered just clicking T-Wave on this. I don't think Aerodactyl's going to get very far if it's T-Waved. Rest Magneton. I don't think you can really do that in front of a non-paralyzed Aerodactyl. If you T-Waved it first, I might be down with this play. But Dedge Beam was going to do it, and Aerodactyl already has a really good crit rate. So I think this is kind of wasteful. I think Bohrier got into a really good position because of those Aerodactyl plays and then does this. I don't know if I liked going to Mr. Mime there either, because I think Leoperi was very incentivized to Hyper Beam. And either way, good follow-up with Eradicate. So I think this game, the plays are looking a little weird. I liked a lot more of the plays in earlier games than this. I hope we don't see Aerodactyl stay in on this Magneton. Reflect. That's interesting. I think that going for rest there is probably the right call as well. Magneton can't really do anything to opposing Magneton. Let's in Whirl. This is horrifically risky. Even with Amnesia up, you're not really tanking hits from Magneton, so if you miss and get T-Waved, this is brutal. I think you could have gone for that T-Wave, to be perfectly honest. I would have taken the 60-40 there, but I might be a little off base. Also, Poliwhirl can definitely just Oko Aerodactyl. I have no clue why Hypnosis was clicked there. Surf would have just removed it. And just generally, I'm not a big fan of Poliwhirl at all. It's way too frail. The speed tier that it has gotten steadily worse as more and more things faster or equal to it have been introduced. And just overall, these lines are hard to comment on because I think we're very off track from doing anything that would be more consistent in this tier. I think it is very funny that both of them have a Magneton, Aerodactyl, Poliwhirl. I have to wonder if they have the same 6 in a different arrangement. And I have to wonder about Hydro Pump, Blizzard, Poliwhirl. That's just walled by any water and can get Seismic Toss down. This rat is doing a lot of work for Leoperi. Good job keeping it healthy, although it's going to be hard to keep doing so. I think you had to just go to Magneton. I don't really like trading that much rat health for one hit on a physically bulky Pokemon. Hard rat into rat as well. What health is the Aerodactyl at? It's at 80, but asleep, so I suppose. But you could have just tanked that with Magneton. Now, if the last is Zard, that'll be very funny. It is. Same 6, different arrangement. And if this is a Swords Dance War, this is going to get really stupid really fast. I hate these scenarios. It's basically, they're going to go to +4, and then Hyper Beam is a 69.2% KO from full. Speed Ties wins the speed tie, gets the roll. Yeah, so 2-2. Really, honestly, silly endgame that I think both of them had options to avoid. I really don't like either of these teams. As I've said before, Poliwhirl is a fake water resist. Very easy to wear down. I think you can go more aggressive than that if you want to drop waters from your team. Like, I think you drop Aerodactyl and pile on more offense. I think you drop Poliwhirl for Poliwrath or Venomoth or Ghastly. I don't know. I think that this is trying too hard to do too many things while not covering for some really obvious scenarios like Seadra. So, interesting that they both brought it. I'm personally not a big fan of how that game went in a lot of ways. But we get a game 5, and those are always fun. So here we see, interesting, reversed matchup. This time Leoperi with the Zard and Bohrier with the Arcanine. Kabutops revealed. I think you're happy to see that early and know what you have to play around, and Venusaur can come in. Very happy that Leoperi didn't predict, but I think Slash was always a safe click there, so I don't know what that was about. Goes for Sleep Powder. Leoperi fearless, even though Razor Leaf will just one-hit KO this. And Bohrier predicts the switch a couple times. Now, Kabutops has very realistic odds to wake in a late game against Fires, so I do think you use Zard to try to bully into that situation. Really don't like the Razor Leaf click there. You know there's a Zard. You know that most teams probably have 2-4 times resist to that because Zard, Moltres, Venomoth are all pretty common. I'm going to pause and slow down on a couple of those turns and talk about that, but I think starting from this Razor Leaf click, I think you could have afforded to go for Body Slam or even double out of that to go to something like Mime or Rat. It's a little more aggressive. But when Blastoise comes in on this Zard, my immediate thought is they could get sleep, let's double out. And Mr. Mime seems to imply there's no Venomoth in back. Going for Body Slam and paralyzing it is nice, but you're still going to get forced out to something that is going to either get KO'd or get paralyzed. So I don't see so much value in that Body Slam. I think if you're predicting a switch, you can just double out to something that prevents Moth and goes even with Mime. Hyper Beam should be a roll there at best, so. Okay, and Kabutops in. I really don't like this. There's still 2 unrevealed on Bohrier's side. It's very possible that one of them is a Venomoth or other sleeper. It's also very possible Bohrier could go to something like a Charizard and just set up in your face. But it does get Venusaur in, and that's nice if it gets the sleep, which is looking less likely now. But it does. Now, here I think you absolutely have to switch out. You can't stay in on this. Arcanine's going to come in for free. I would have just gone to Zard personally. Or Mime. Seadra revealed. Now, I think this is a bit early with an 80% toy still out there. Bohrier just going for it. Taking the hits on this as Seadra just goes for Freeze Fish on a predicted incoming Blastoise. I don't really know about using Arcanine like that. You have a Blastoise for a reason, but I guess saving it to check Zard, even though there's also an Aerodactyl. I think there's maybe a little bit too much one turn ahead gaming with some of these plays. I think here I absolutely would have gone to Blastoise and just fought it that way instead of doing this. That Hyper Beam getting a crit is a big deal. This would have looked really bad if not. Now, I wonder what Bohrier's last is. Charizard. That's probably something that will do some work here. Though it is going to be a little bit hard to stop this Golduck from doing a lot here. Seismic Toss Zard. I don't think you can do this sort of thing. I'm going to check the health. I guess 45% parried Venusaur is fine, but Mr. Mime is healthy enough to take out this Zard now, so I don't think you can afford to take that hit. Zard takes 42 to 50 from Thunderbolt from Mr. Mime, so now you're banking on full paralysis luck to win the game. I think you just had to go to Toys and Seismic Toss this down. Even if it boosts on you, you should get enough Seismic Tosses in for Zard to finish, so I think that was a pretty blatant mistake, just like this Mime switch is a mistake. This is once again leaving Zard open to win the game. Now, I think you could have just sacked this rat earlier. Not taken that Thunder Wave, not taken all this damage. Now, like, you're going to have to go to Zard, you're going to KO this, Golduck's going to come in, you're going to have to go to Blastoise and take a hit or let it set up Amnesia. And now your odds of breaking through that Golduck and surviving this game just look so much worse. So Blastoise should only need one Seismic Toss to make this okay here. Good switch to Venusaur. Now if I'm Leoperi, I double back. Does not make the double. Still, I think Golduck might mop this up at this point. We'll have to see. I think it's going to come down to a full paralysis. Blastoise should be just out of range of Seismic Toss. Yeah. Okay, works out for Bohrier. So Bohrier on the board 1-0. Leoperi unfortunately losing a second set. That one came down to the wire. I think a few turns back into this, if I go back to around right as the Zard takes out the opposing Zard, I think the plays got messy here. I think that Seismic Toss was super unneeded and you just need to go to your Blastoise here. Because once you take this hit, you're opening yourself up to get haxed by Mr. Mime. Or not even haxed, but just if it doesn't have bad paralysis luck, bad things can happen. I think right there, it might have been worth considering just trading the hits with Golduck. Complicated situation, actually. Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to delve too much into this because I do think, yet again, like the early game, some of the plays might have contributed to this outcome. Once again, like that Kabutops got sacked to sleep when it didn't need to be, especially on a team with 3 water types. I think you can just sack the Golduck, hold on to the Kabutops, and then you wall the Aerodactyl and the Arcanine, and this game looks a lot different from this very strange endgame that played out. Yeah, my brain is turning off at this point. I've been recording this set for like almost 35 minutes, so I'm not going to get too in-depth in the endgame. But let's talk about the teams. 2 Venusaurs, Leoperi bringing Water Spam with a Venusaur to help cover for Magneton. And Bohrier bringing 2 Fire types, an Aerodactyl, a nice little Fire Water Grass trio with Eradicate. Overall, I think I like Bohrier's team better here. I don't know if I like Blastoise, as said before multiple times. I think you could have made that like a Poliwrath, and I like this team a lot better already. But it works out for him, so congrats Bohrier on getting a win on the board. And I'm going to wrap this one up, but I think I'll do one more tonight. So see you all in the next one.